Welcome to this session. My guest is Dr. Nokuthula Msimang, and our topic will be on Dolly Rathebe, the life and times of a great South African artist. We are sorry that we have to start late. We're a bit shaky, but we'll see how far we can take this one. Thank you. Welcome, Nokuthula. How are you?
Rosem, I am fantastic, and I'm glad that to have you on video and to see you after reading all of your amazing work and being your stalker on the social platforms. So this is a great honor for me to be talking to the Sam Mathe.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. I'm very happy to have you on this one. Thank you for the project. It had to happen. It was just a matter of time, I guess. But for me personally, over the years, I've been wondering when someone will be able to put something together in book form to really pay tribute to this great South African musician. So thank you for that.
It was a labor of love, Sam. Of course, you will know that your biography on the South African musicians, primarily of the jazz genre, was extremely helpful. And of course, there is a chapter on Mama Dolly Rathebe there. I absolutely adore Dolly and Dolly's music. I was very fortunate, in the early 90s when Kippies was still open in Newtown, to see Mama Dolly live singing Njilo Njilo, and seeing Mama Dolly live, oh my word, time absolutely stops. And you really just have to, you are mesmerized, you are enchanted, you are just absolutely taken over by the power of her voice, the power of her music. A lot of people who are interested in the 50s will know Mam Dolly as a model, as a pin-up. She was a drum cover girl, right? So she graced a lot of the drum magazine covers. So of course, drum was circulating in Africa in those days. So she was fairly, known in many countries, around the continent. So I've always just been fascinated by, how just powerful she is in culture. But I did a paper for the Johannesburg Institute of Advanced Scholarship, of Advanced Study, called the Mega Divas of Sophia Town.
Okay.
Because it was that time, when they were larger than life. And of course, Mama Dolly paved the way. She was the first of the mega divas to be very famous, to be very successful, So from that paper, I think very much also inspired by Dr. Siphiwe Mahala's biography on Ken Temba. I then, decided to expand it into a book, assisted by a fellowship from the University of Pretoria, a 2-year fellowship from the Future Africa Institute. So I was very fortunate that at least, I had some time to be able to go to the archives and research Mam Dolly's life, talk to her family, watch the movies, the videos, and so on.
Okay. Let's zoom in on that one, the family in particular. How was your experience, talking to, say, for instance, the children? I understand, I think she had about three children. Her firstborn was born in the early years, meaning in the 50s, around 1952. Is she still alive? And is she one of the people that?
Well, I spoke to her, mainly her grandson, Tshepo Duhu, Mam Thelma's son. So Abuti Smilo, I think, has since sadly
It's
passed
passed on, yeah.
on. Yeah, he has passed on. So Tempo was quite useful just in terms of also helping me to gain access to, of course, the family history, family
Yeah.
photographs and so on, and working from memory. And it's very much a memory project, right? Because it's what the family, what the friends remember, So he was very helpful with that. But critically, he assisted me in gaining access to Samro, because they do have protocols in terms of talking about Mam Dolly's estate, because I had to be sure that what is registered as Mam Dolly's compositions is what's recorded at Samro, So with the family, of course, being in charge of the estate, I would need to go via the family for me to gain that information. So the family was interesting, but also it gives you, talking to a grandson, talking to a daughter, talking to a friend, talking to somebody that Mam Dolly mentored, is different from reading what Brasem Mathe has written, right? And who has been following the proceedings and so on. So that gives you, different textures, different layers of Mam Dolly. It's a different kind of flavor, I think, that you get, rather than if you're just looking at the newspapers or just listening to the news. The family you get to hear about Koko. Wabona Koko ne le mme wa seaparo. Wabona e le mme wa seaparo ka di-Thursdays, e le elder ko kerekeng, a tsamaya kereke ya AME. Wabona a kere rona re tseba
intimate details that most of us are not privy to, in a way.
You get to see another side, because we know Mam Dolly Rathebe as very glamorous, right? The 50s was a very glamorous era that Louis Nkosi famously described as the fabulous decade, right? So she was on the forefront of the fabulous decade,
but she was also a mother,
But she was also a mother, like you said, President, she was a mother to 3 children.
She was a mother, she was a mother,
She was a wife, she married a welcome to. She then married an American sailor, Mr. Smith. She was also linked to Ndate Buti Nketle, who was one of the very famous gangsters of Sophia Town. Right? They were not married, but they had a son together. So she lived a large life. She had a huge life, and that's what I think makes me celebrate and makes me feel joyful and so honored about telling the story, because her life was larger than life. I mean, you situated her in that space, that she was a pathfinder, right?
Yes. And here's something else. She was not born Dolly Rathebe per se. She was somebody called Josephine Malatsi. So what really intrigues me is the fact that she started life as Josephine Malatsi, but most of us, we don't know that, of course. Can you take us through that? How she became Dolly Rathebe, and when? And perhaps also why? Did we find out from the research why she decided to do that?
Well, look, she had a friend who was quite sort of beautiful and well-off, called Dolly Rathebe, right? So Dolly Rathebe, I would imagine, look, sounds probably more glamorous than Josephine Malatsi,
Josephine Malatsi.
Malatsi. So, if you're called Dolly, I think for the big screen and for your brand, and I think probably she was right because, the name Dolly then became, of course, slang for everything that is wonderful, everything that is happening, everything that's hip, it's Dolly, So she was probably on the money when she changed her name from Ms. Malatsi to Dolly Rathebe.
Yes, and in terms of the timeline, do we know whether she changed her name during her school years, her schoolgirl years, or when she started in showbiz? For instance, I think her first gig was Jim Comes to Joburg in 1949.
Yeah.
Of course, she was already she was registered as Dolly Rathebe. But do we know when exactly this happened?
Look, I
Is it
don't
familiar when?
know precisely when, but Jim Comes to Joburg kind of hit the big screen in 1949, right?
Yeah.
So by the time she hit the big time, she was already Dolly Rathebe,
Yeah.
But she was, it sounds like, she was known around Sophia Town because she was performing at weddings, anywhere where there was a gathering of people. Dolly would break into song, So from what I can gather is that she knew that she was destined for the big time, right? She already at that young age, she was barely out of her teens, right? Yeah, barely out of her teens, and she was already belting out Ella Fitzgerald. She was already, belting out a lot of the jazz standards. So I think she was already at a very young age crafting her road to stardom. But when she hit the big time, she hit the big time as Dolly Rathebe. So all the newspapers that you read from that time refer to her from the reviews of Jim Comes to Joburg in 1949.
And this was
referred to
late teens.
Yeah, she was around 18, 19, thereabout. Oh, there's Minentem Tembu sending us love. I was reading the messages on the side.
And we also, she was 19. Yeah, when Jim Comes to Joburg in 1949.
Yeah, it hit the screen the time.
Oh, that she was not.
Oh, Brazil, you're breaking up a bit. I think maybe turn off your camera.
How much do we know about?
Okay, thank you to everybody who's joined us live. We're having some internet issues, and we had already started talking about my upcoming book, Dolly Rathebe, the Queen of African Jazz, Blues and Mbaqanga, which will launch later in April at the Javed Gallery at the University of Pretoria. So until we get Brasem Mathe back, who I was conversing with, I see there he comes back. So if he does happen to drop out and come back again.
Yeah.
Brasem, fantastic. Yeah, I think maybe keep your camera off, and then we'll just work with your wonderful voice. And I just see the chat on the side. There's Arnold Letwaba who says, awesome. Didn't really know she changed her name. Yeah,
yes, I see.
It's amazing because everybody just knows her as Dolly Rathebe, but she was Joseph Malatsi to start off. Yeah.
Sure. And then I was on the issue of her births and her parents. I was saying that
Yeah.
we know that she lived in Sophiatown. Most of us are aware of that. Not sure how many people are aware that
Yeah.
born further west. This is in Fontaine. How much of
Yes.
Fontaine was there in her life during her Sophiatown years, even after?
You
Was
know,
that a
Sam,
place?
I have to be well, in terms of her timeline, I mentioned that she was born in Randfontein, right? But in
Yes.
terms of her coming of age, you know, she went to primary school in Sophia
Yeah.
Town, and she spent her primary school years in Sophia Town, and she spent a lot of her years becoming Dolly Rathebe in Kofifi, right?
Yes.
So a big part of my focus is Kofifi. A big part of my focus is when she moved out east to Port Elizabeth. She also lived in Cape Town. Yes, and then she comes back. Of course, she comes back in the 80s, right?
Yeah.
In the 80s. She comes back in the 80s and she lives in Mabopane.
Okay.
Right. So earlier, Sam, you were talking about, you know, the many layers of Mam Dolly, the superstar, the mother, the Coco, and so on. But there's also Mam Dolly of Randfontein. There is Mam Dolly of Kofifi.
That's what I'm trying.
Exactly what you're pointing out.
Yeah.
There's Mam Dolly
Yeah.
of
I'm trying
PE.
to explore. Yeah. I'm trying to explore the Randfontein part. For instance, in her adult years, did she have any connection with Randfontein in her adult
Not as
years?
in her adult years, you know, not as far as I could gather. What I gathered about the adult years, obviously, you know, there's the Mabopane connection, but there is also a deep love, which I was intrigued about, a deep love for Soweto. You will know that Mam Dolly is buried in Soweto, you know, and she said, look, ek wel met al die clevers, you know, ek wel met al die clevers and Soweto, gaan Paula, you know. So she wanted to go to Soweto and chill with all the, you know, all the kind of music loving and just fun time loving people of Soweto, right? So, you know, she had a thing. And of course, her best friend, who I spoke to at length, Mam Abby Kubega, Mam Abigail Kubega, lives in Soweto, right? She lives in Orlando. So, and she had a few, you know, quite a few friends, you know, in Soweto. But for some reason, you know, she loved the vibe of Soweto. She loved the music of Soweto. I spoke as well to Ndate Sipho Hot Sticks Mabuse, who lives in Soweto as well, you know. And, you know, she had this fascination with the culture of Soweto, with the music of Soweto, you know. But, you know, even beyond that, I think, although, you know, unlike one of her other friends, Mama Miriam Makeba, she never agreed to go abroad because she felt, look, she had, you know, too many family responsibilities at home. So, you know, she never took up the offer, for example, to go to America with her second husband, Mr. Smith. She stayed at home, but I think, you know, Mam Dolly, you can't really pin her down to a place, you know. Mam Dolly was an African superstar, you know. She hit it big in the 50s on the cover of Drum magazine, which was circulating in Southern Africa, circulating in East Africa, circulating in West Africa, you know. And of course, she saw herself as part of that global jazz sound, which was a global sound, you know. She saw herself as creating a new South African jazz sound, you know. She saw herself as creating what we know, what Hugh Masekela referred to as, you know, the great South African songbook. As jazz lovers, Brasem, we will know that South African jazz is very specific, with very heavy on the bass, right? It's heavy on the bass, it's heavy on the groove, it's heavy on the soul, uses local languages, but very global, right? Very global. And that's why Makeba was able to take it abroad. And if you know the story of Makeba, you know the story of Dolly Rathebe, right? So yes, she was from Randfontein. Yes, she was a mega diva of Sophia Town. She was from Kofifi. She was a mega diva of Africa, of South Africa. But she was global in her sound, in her outlook, in her attitude, from people that I spoke to. Claudia Schadeberg, who is the widow of one of Mam Dolly's photographers, Jürgen Schadeberg, spoke about just how Mam Dolly was at home anywhere in the world. In her later years, she got to travel, of course. She went on tour, but she was at home anywhere in the world. She was global. She was truly, truly global.
Okay, let's fast forward to 2004 when she passes on. In 2015, there's a school project, I think in Parktown Girls High. And then a young star, Tainita Harila, that was her name. I think she was in grade 12. The teacher had asked them to do a project on icons, South African legends or icons. And then she chose Dolly Rathebe. But to her horror, she discovered that 11 years after her passing, there was still no tombstone on her grave. And then now that actually unveiled another chapter in her life posthumously. 11 years is quite a long time, especially for somebody of her caliber, somebody who have contributed so much to the culture of the country. Your insights on that, what does that tell us about ourselves as a country and our attitudes towards people who have contributed so immensely, but in their death, they were not treated with the dignity they deserved?
Prasem, I think let me first talk about the young lady that you referred to. What is her name again? I did come across her story. I just forget her name. What's her name again?
Tainita Harilal.
Aha, Ms. Harilal.
Tainita,
I think Ms. Harilal did a fantastic job just excavating Mam Dolly's story. I think, when somebody passes on, it does give us an opportunity to celebrate their life, to remember them, and to honor them, right? So, I was just glad that, such a young person, a high school learner, felt moved by the story of this mega diva of Sophia Town called Dolly Rathebe. She felt moved enough to want to erect a tombstone for her. I found that, fabulous. And I really, I think all respect to her for that project. It was a school project and she did a fantastic job. What for me I think is of more value is the fact that she shared the memory and the work of Mam Dolly with her classmates, with her schoolmates, and with South Africa, right? Because the story is now on YouTube. And, the book project for me, that's where its value lies, and I'm really kind of hoping that the interest in Mam Dolly Rathebe will produce, many more biographies, will produce films, will, inspire young people to do reinterpretations of Mam Dolly Rathebe's songs. For all of us, really, to do also the work that you, Sam Mathe, have been doing in remembering all of our wonderful icons in book form. I want it to be really a kind of a bigger project that we all own. I think South African musicians in general have done extremely well in honoring our musical heritage and reinterpreting it, right? Thandiswa Mazwai, in when was it? Was it the 90s? When she did the song. What was it titled? Was it titled Mageba? So I think all of us in different ways can honor the memory of our icons. But I really, I think what South African musicians are doing in that regard is fantastic. So for me, I would rather just focus on that, groove with that. What the musicians are doing, in honoring South African jazz. Even the Amapiano kids have incorporated South African jazz into their sound. And where does that DNA come from? It comes from people like Dolly Rathebe, people like Miriam Makeba, Letambulu, Sophie Mgcina, the later generations, Busi Mhlongo, Sibongile Khumalo, even the current stars, your Thandi Ntulis and so on. So I think there are different ways to honor our greats, and I'm hoping that the recent kind of interest in South African music means that the youngsters are making a living, and I hope somebody is talking to them about investing while the time is right, because music, as you know, Sam, is a seasonal kind of job, right? So simply because you are huge today, it may not mean you are huge tomorrow. So I hope those kinds of conversations are going on. But yeah, I think South African musicians have done a great job in honoring the legacy.
Yeah, okay, sure. Basically, I think my question was two-pronged. The fact that the discovery was incidental, and also I'm trying to understand the state of mind that we are in as a nation in terms of how we value or not value our heritage. That is what I was trying, because this it's not just about her. It's quite a long list of musicians or basically artists who have contributed so much, but for some reasons we tend to have this amnesia, collective amnesia, especially posthumously. After they've passed on, there's very little in terms of celebration. And so I wanted us to zoom a little bit on that, and then we can move on to other things. That's what I was trying to figure out.
You're right.
Yeah.
You're right. That look, it's not enough. It's not enough. The cases that I've pointed out, people like your Black Coffee remixing Mambusi Mhlongo's music, the Thandiswa Mazwais and so on. Much more can be done, given the impact of somebody like Dolly Rathebe in creating the DNA of South African jazz, given the impact of somebody like Mama Miriam Makeba. I think you're absolutely right, Sam. Look, and it's almost like it's a missed opportunity because that heritage is such a treasure trove, right? Of music,
Yes.
um, of stories,
Yes. So what
stories
can we
which you and
yeah,
I have learned,
what I'm
right?
trying to figure out is, so what can we do? The artists are playing their role, the current generation are playing their role in terms of remembering them in song, with cover versions and all that. That is
Yeah.
understandable. But as a society,
There's the old.
what can we do? For instance, a hall of fame, for instance. Do we need, monuments? Do we need that?
Let me tell you what we need.
Yeah.
We need. I think what would be really helpful to the estate of people like Mam Dolly Rathebe is for them to get
Yeah.
airplay.
Okay.
For platforms to really play South African jazz. And again, even in that regard, there are some people, who honor South African jazz. Your Nothemba Madumos, your Brenda Sisanes, and so on.
Mhm.
But it needs to be much more.
Yeah.
If you switch on the radio today, you'd be hard pressed to find just a critical sort of a mass of South African jazz songs being played, right?
Yeah, that's true.
So yeah, so
That's,
I think for me, I mean, I'm always thinking, ukuthi, dollar, how do we monetize the creative economy, right?
exactly.
Um, so a great way to monetize the creative economy is for that music to get airplay, right?
Exactly.
Um,
And for me, what is sad, if I may come in there, what
yeah,
I find so sad
yeah,
is that I can't recall listening to a Dolly Rathebe song in this millennium on radio. I probably the last time I heard
mm,
it was probably in the 90s. And on
mm,
those very rare occasions. So that really makes it saddens me that somebody who has contributed so much, but at the same time, the same person, uh, her music, which is our heritage, is not
mm.
recognized by our radio stations. I feel very strongly about such issues.
Yeah,
This neglect at the expense, or rather in favor of American music, which I don't have a problem with. But I think
yeah.
everybody has a place on our airwaves.
Yeah, yeah. And not just a place, Sam. Our music is exquisite, you know. So here we are, we've got golden sounds, which are timeless, which can be exported, which are being exported in other forms, but the world loves South African jazz. And as you will know, that Mam Dolly taught quite a bit, in America in the 2000s, right? The early 2000s. So the world absolutely adores South African jazz, South African music, and you'll often hear that our artists do better abroad than here at home. So it is really a missed opportunity. I mean, if you look at the fact that a venue like Kippies,
Yes.
in the 90s, Kippies was happening, right? There was a venue like Jamison's in Commissioner Street, right?
Mhm.
Where you could go during the day and watch some fantastic live jazz, right? So there's the issue of venues. Where do you hear fantastic jazz? It's sporadic. You have something like the joy of jazz. Yandate Peter, right? So that platforms like the Joy of Jazz is fantastic,
Mm.
but also for the caliber and the quality of music that we have, it's a drop in the ocean. You're absolutely correct.
Yeah.
It's a drop in the ocean. So we just don't know how fabulous we are.
Yeah.
And we don't know how to make money of our treasures, sadly.
Yeah, no, unfortunately,
So
that's so unfortunate. But let's move on. You
mm,
did, if I'm not mistaken, I haven't been able to see this on TV, unfortunately. But
mm,
your resume indicates that you have two films or docus, and somehow the titles relates to music or subculture, as in the lady was Mshoza, and then the
mm.
second one is the gift of song. Yeah, I'm particularly interested in those ones, and because I'm trying to figure out if they are somehow connected to this subject matter that we are discussing today.
Well, I love music, right? I love music. I love South African music. I love African music. So the gift of song was a tribute to, at the time, there were young black opera singers. So it was your Gloria Bosmans, your Sibongile Ngomas, your Agos
Yeah.
Moahis, So they were sort of making waves at the time. And I felt that, oh gosh, what a curious art form to choose, opera. At the time, it wasn't, even now, I still think it's not sort of a wild, widely taken up
Mhm.
um,
So,
genre
mm,
of music, right? And of course, I spent some years being the great Sibongile Khumalo's PA. I was her personal assistant, right? So I
okay.
spent a lot of time listening to her, rehearsing. I remember one time she was a part of a production of Carmen, and she played Carmen, the main
Mhm.
role, and she was rehearsing, her scales with the pianist. Um, and of course, I've seen her in Umzilikazi Khumalo's Ushaka Kasenza Ngakhona,
Mhm.
and I actually got to interview Ubaba Umzilikazi Khumalo about his love of opera, and specifically about composing the opera Ushaka Kasenza
Yeah.
Ngakhona. So I was interested in that meeting of this Italian art form, of course, with the kind of epic African stories and what the young Black opera singers were kind of doing with that. So that was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was presented at ZIF, the Zanzibar International Film Festival. And also, Lady was Mshoza, which was looking at the women of the Sipanzula subculture, of course, Sipanzula and music, this fabulous
Together.
dance and music coming out of the townships. Of course, growing up in Soweto, I got to see Sepanzula and appreciate the music that we all were grooving to and dancing to.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think, like most South Africans, most Africans, music is really kind of part of the air that we breathe. The saying that, look, when we are happy, Rabina, when we are sad, Rabina, when we are working, we are singing or listening to music. So yeah, so I've had a long, long love and fascination, just for South African jazz and music in general.
Okay, great stuff. We're approaching the end, but there's still some issues that I think we can discuss.
Mhm.
The book launch. When are we having a book launch? And yeah, let's start there. Let's have the details, venue, and date.
Yeah, well, we'll launch on the 30th of April at the Javed Gallery, the University of Pretoria. So yeah, we will remind people on the socials closer to the time. So the 30th of April, as you'll know, is International Jazz Day, and also April is Mam Dolly Rathebe's birth month. So her birthday is on the 2nd of April, as Sam Mathe will remind us on his social media pages. So I thought, April is a good month. But also, of course, she passed on, as you mentioned earlier, in 2004. So it's 20 years since Mam Dolly passed on. So I think it feels like a good time to remember her, to celebrate her, and to bring out the book.
So it's timely. It's really timely. And
Yeah, I think so.
yeah, definitely. And for those of us who have already read the book, we've already bought the book at the launch, will it be the same edition, or will there be slight additions or differences?
There might be a slight. There is an addition and some differences to the press copy that you have. That is Sam Mathe. So yeah, but that the focus is still the same, obviously, on her compositions, so her famous songs, bo Mangwane Nthekele Seranta Bole, bo Bombela, so yeah, really that was for me the main kind of reason for wanting to keep the memory alive, because it's easier to remember, of course, those amazing 1950s pictures that Jürgen Schönebeck took, and to remember her as a drum cover girl, and to remember her as a singer, but I think the fact that she was a composer is really, really, really for us to remember and to celebrate.
Yeah. And also to remember the fact that she was a great actor or actress.
Yes.
We tend to downplay her role on the screen, whether it was on TV or in the movies. She did so much. I mean, from the early years, in the late teens, and until in her autumn years. She just did so much. When you look at movies like Papanzula, yeah.
Thank you so much for raising that point. That she indeed, stayed acting right up until her golden years. And that is something that I really was interested in as a woman a woman artist as well. That Mam Dolly stayed. Well, I mean, look, it went in sort of in waves, right? So in the 50s, I mean, she was very famous in the 50s. Then she retreated a bit into motherhood and so on. But then she came back in the 80s, did some performances. She was on television, so it did come in waves. And I am just in awe that, her longevity, the fact that she stayed in the public eye, through the many phases of Dolly Rathebe is really something to marvel at. Even as she was growing older, and Sam, you and I will know that the older we get, even the energies start to flag a bit.
but it suggests staying power in a case, and I'll also say commitment to her craft. She was dedicated to the end.
She was the music, right? She was the music. She loved the music. She was a fantastic artist. As you've stated that, she was an icon on so many levels. In terms of her music, in terms of the small screen, in terms of the big screen, in terms of live performances. She is one of the few people whose voice actually became richer with age. In fact, that was one of the things that Sticks Mabuse pointed out. He was managing Kippies at the time, and the live performance that I referred to earlier when I saw Dolly Rathebe live at Kipi's. Ndate Sipho Hotsticks Mabuse actually said that, you know, she was singing live, so there was no tweaking of her voice, you know, no, you know, sort of making her sound, you know, different or better or whatever. It was her live, you know, and her voice was incredible, incredible. And in fact, as you know, that Sipho Hotsticks Mabuse has an incredible ear, you know, for music, has an incredible ear for melody and texture. And he said, you know, her rendition of Nchilo Nchilo is one of the best renditions he has ever heard, you know. So coming from a maestro saying that, you know, is incredible, you know.
Great stuff. Let me thank you again for this moment, and particularly for the fact that you managed to have this out there. Is quite a treasure. Is a worthy addition to
Thank you so much, Sen Mathe, you know, for your work.
the narrative.
Thank you. And thank you to the Time of the Writer, you know, for affording us the time
yes.
to have this conversation. And thank you, of course, to everybody who sent messages, Mina Tembu, Arnold Letwaba, and everybody out there who's been listening. Thank you very much.
Sure. And let me apologize once more for the teething problems that we've had. But I'm glad that finally, eventually, we managed to go through this one.
Yes, we managed to make a plan and work something out.
Exactly.
Thank you. And thank you to the wonderful Bash who did all the technical, you know, plugging and sorting out.
Indeed. Indeed. Sepin, they couldn't see my shirt enough, but that's fine. Next time.
Yes, I was hoping that you put at least a still picture of your wonderful shirt, you know. You know.
Okay, but there it is again.
What a fantastic shirt. No, but wonderful to chat, Sam Mathe. And once again, thank you for your book.
Yeah.
Yeah. And thank you, Time of the Writer.
So yes, great stuff.